Okay, so did you read that next problem? They gave us the Simplex Tableau, which is right here, and they're asking us to pivot around certain numbers. Well, they gave me 5 parts to look at, so let's just look at part A. Part A is asking us to pivot this tableau about the number 2. Notice in this tableau that there's only 1, 2, so I don't have to worry about the location. This is the one that they want me to pivot around, which means, remember, it means you need to make this 2 into a 1 and get every other number in the same column as the 2 to be a 0. So that's our first goal. First, let's make the 2 into a 1. So the 2 happens to be in the first row. Do you agree? All right, which means what are we going to have to do to that first row in order to make the 2 into a 1? Good, you're like divide by 2. Excellent. So you can take the first row and divide by 2, or you can take 1/2 of that first row. Either way, you're going to get the same answer. So we're going to take row 1 and we're going to divide it by 2. So hopefully you are doing the work as I am switching pens here. So as you do the work, tell me what you're getting. Good. You get 1, you get 3/2, you get 1/2, 0, 0, and a 6. Correct? Okay. And now that 2 is made into a 1. Done. But now I've got to get every other number in that first column to be a 0. So here's my recommendation to you. My recommendation is to clearly rewrite row 2 as well as row 3. Why? Because since row 1 has changed, the number you're going to use to help you get the other numbers in that first column to be a 0 has also changed, right? Okay, so this 1 and this -10 both need to go to 0. Agreed? So here's what we're going to do. In order to make the 1 and the -10 a 0, remember, you're going to have to use the number you just turned into a 1. That's the number you're going to have to use to make the other 2 into a 0. So let's think about it. What do you think we're going to have to do between row 2 and row 1 in order to make this number a 0? Good, subtract. Excellent. So, which order do you want to subtract? Yeah, I agree. Let's make that row 2 minus row 1. By the way, it's always a good idea to write those down. That way you keep on track with what you're supposed to do from one tableau to the next. And row 1, not changing. So 1, 3/2, 1/2, 0, 0, and then the 6. So now, when you take row 2 and subtract row 1, let's do one number at a time. 1 minus 1, 0. 1 minus 3/2, and yes, I'm assuming you remember how to subtract fractions without your calculator. Okay, good. So that'll be a -1/2. 0 minus 1/2 is a -1/2. 1 minus 0, 1. 0 minus 0, 0. And then 18 minus 6. Good, 12. Excellent. So far, so good. So we just got this number to be a 0. Done. But you also need to get, that's right, you also need to get that -10 into a 0, don't you? Okay, so let's think about it. What are you going to do? Remember, to get the -10 to be a 0, you've got to use this number that you made into a 1. So what are you going to do between the -10 and the 1? Good. So you're going to do 10 times row 1, and then you're going to add it to row 3, aren't you? All right, I'm with you. Now, at this point, if you want to pause the video a second, so you can literally take the first row and multiply it by 10, and then put row 3 underneath it. That way you can see what's going on. Some of you are like, I don't get it. Hang in there. So let's just do that. So here's some side work. All right. So you've got to take 10 times the first row, don't you? So 10 times 1. Good. 10 times 3 halves. Yep, that's 15. 10 times 1 half. 5. 10 times 0 is 0, and the other 0 is 0. And 10 times 6 is 60. And you're going to take 10 times this row 1, and you're going to add it to the third row. Well, the third row is comprised of a negative 10, a negative 24, a 0, a 0, a 1, and a 0. And so when you add these together, your new row 3, shall I say, is going to be a 0, a negative 9, a 5, a 0, a 1, and a 60. Cool? Awesome. Okay. And let's see. So we have 0, and then negative 9, I said. Sorry about that. Just checking my work. A 5, a 0, a 1, and a 60. Good? Agreeable? Loving it. Okay. So now, the pivot number was 2. We made it into a 1. The other two numbers in that same column, we got to them to be zeros. And now it's time to find, right, that second group, the new group 2. Remember what our goal was. After we do this work, our goal is to look for the columns that have the 1s and the 0s in them. Let me relabel our columns. This one's X, Y, U, V, and the M. So I'm noticing columns X and column V and column M have the 1 and the 0s. So let's look at that. So the X column, that means that X, the 1 here, is going to be equal to 6. The V has the 1 in it in the second row, so it means that the V is going to be equal to 12. And last but not least, the M, the 1 is in the third row, which means it's going to be equal to 60. And you're like, well, wait, what happens to the Y and the U? Does the Y and the U, did they have 1s and 0s only in those two columns? No, they didn't. Therefore, the Y is equal to 0 and the U is also equal to 0. Cool? Okay. Well, there's a part B, so stay tuned for part B. Ready for part B? So part B is asking us to pivot around the number 3. So I look at the table and there's only one place I see a 3. It's in that second column, which means we need to get that 3 to be a 1 and all the other non-pivotal numbers in that column to be a 0. So 3 is in column 2. So the 3 is going to be a 1 and these other two numbers in column 2 need to go to 0. Good? Okay, so first things first. We need to make the 3 into a 1. Agreed? So how are we going to make that 3 into a 1? Yeah, we're going to divide the first row by 3. And when we do that, row 1 is going to be 2/3, 1, 1/3, 0, 0, and 12 divided by 3 is 4. Lovely. I'm going to rewrite the other two rows so that I have my full tableau so I can start making the other non-pivot numbers in column 2 to be a 0. So row 2 is a 1, 1, 0, 1, 0, 18. Row 3 is negative 10, negative 24, 0, 0, 1, and a 0. Okay, so now we need to make this 1 into a 0. So how are we going to do it? Yeah, remember, you have to use the number you just made into a 1 to help you get this other number, these other two numbers to be a 0. So, yeah, we have to subtract. You're absolutely correct. So we are going to subtract row 2 minus row 1. Good? Okay, when we do that, and yes, you're like, fractions! You can handle them, trust me. Okay, so row 2. So 1 minus 2/3. Yeah. Oh, wait. Yeah, we're going to write row 1 first. Agreed? Yeah, let's get row 1 down. Because I'm not trying to make a 0 in that row 1, since I already got the 3 to be a 1 in that row. So, okay, now let's go. Row 2 minus row 1. So 1 minus 2/3, that's 1/3. 1 minus 1, 0. 0 minus 1/3, negative 1/3. 1 minus 0, 1. 0 minus 0, 0. And then 18 minus 4 is 14. Excellent. So far, so good? Cool. Okay. And I am just going to give us a little line right here to separate the two tableaus. And now I need to make this negative 24 into a 0. So what do you think you got to do? Remember, you've got to use the 1 in that first row, second column, because that's where that 3 was that you made into a 0. So what do you think you're going to have to do? Yes, you're going to have to multiply that 1 by a 24 and add it to the negative 24. Agreed? So we are going to write that as 24 times the first row, and then we're going to add it to the third row to get our new third row in this tableau. All right. And again, if you need to pause the video and do some side work, please pause the video and do some side work. And then start it up again and see if the two of us agree. So we're going to do 24 times the 2/3. What'd you guys get? Yeah, that is 16 plus the negative 10. So there's a 6. 24 times the 1, 24 minus the 24, or I should say plus the negative 24, is 0. 24 times a third, 8, plus the 0, still 8. Well, 0 times any number is 0, so 0 plus 0 is 0. And 24 times 0 is 0, so 0 plus 1 is 1. And then I've got 24 times 4, which is 96, plus the 0 will give me 96. And it looks like my line is a little askew. So once I straighten that out, there we go. Okay. So we pivoted around the 3. We got all the other non-pivots in that same column to be a 0. And now we are going to look and see which columns have the 1s and the 0s in them. So I'm going to relabel our columns. This one's the X, the Y, the U, the V, and the M. So check it out. Which columns have the 1s and the 0s? Yeah, the Y, the V, and the M. Correct? So we've got X, Y, the U, the V, and the M. Okay. So which ones did we say? Good, the Y. So I'm noticing the Y has the 1 in the first row, which means Y is going to be equal to 4. Got it. And the V has the 1 in the second row, which means V is going to be equal to 14. And then M has the 1 in the third row, which means M is 96. So what about the X and the U? Yeah, those guys are just going to be 0 because they didn't have the 1s and the 0s. Good? Cool. Got part C coming up. So part C. Part C is asking us to pivot around the number 1, and they had to be specific. Why? Because there's a lot of 1s floating around in this tableau. So we need to pivot around the number 1 that's located in the second row, first column. This is the number I need to pivot around. Now here's the deal. Gratefully, that number is already a 1. So I don't have to make it into a 1. But since it's in the first column and it's done, I need to make the other two non-pivot numbers in that first column to be zeros. So that's our task. So we have one less step to do. Good for us. All right. So the first number you're going to make into a 0 in that first column is the 2. And you're going to make that into a 0 by using that number 1. Good? All right. So what are you going to have to do? Good. You're going to have to multiply that by a 2, aren't you? All right. So I am going to take row 1 and I am going to subtract 2 times the second row. And the second row is the row that has the pivot number in it. So that row is not going to change. So I'm going to write that row down. So we had 1, 1, 0, 1, 0, and then the 18. Got it. Okay. So now, row 1, and I'm going to subtract from it 2 times the second row. So we're going to get a 0, right? 2 minus 2. And then we're going to have 3 minus 2, which is 1. And then we're going to have 1 minus 0. And then we're going to have 0 minus 2. And then we're going to have 0 minus 0. And then we're going to have 12 minus 36. So 12 minus 36 is a negative 24, isn't it? Good. All right. And then, now that that's done, we need to get that negative 10 to be a 0, don't we? By using that number 1. So, yeah, we're going to have to multiply this 1 by a 10, which means the whole row, right? And then we're going to have to add it to that third row. So, the way that I've written it is exactly what we just said. 10 times the second row, and we're going to add it to the third row. Good? All right. Again, if you need to do some side work, please do some side work. Pause the video, do your side work, and then come back and see if you agree with me. Cool? All right. Did you do it? All right. So let's see what we got. So 10 times row 2. So 10 minus 10, 0. And this is going to be 10 plus a negative 24. And 0 plus 0. And 10 plus 0, right, is 10. We're going to have 0 plus 1. And then we're going to have 10 times 18, 180 plus the 0 gives me 180. Are we good? Lovely. All right. Relabel your columns. We have X, Y, U, V, and the M. So we are trying to decide what values these variables are going to have. And how are we going to do that? Look at the columns that have the 1s and the 0s. So let's just start in order this time, okay? Let's keep on track and keep some order. The first two problems, we were specifically looking at those columns to make sure we were good, right? Uh-oh. I think I messed up in column U. We have a bunch of zeros. I think I messed up there. Let me recheck my work. So we said, aha, I found it. Row 1 minus 2 times row 2. So that was going to be 1 minus 0, which was, yeah, 1. See how much fun your brain plays on you sometimes? There we go. 1 minus 0 is 1. Good. Okay, back to writing the values for these variables. So the X. The X has a column of 1s and 0s. The 1 is in the second row, which means X is going to be equal to 18. The Y, yeah, it's not a bunch of 1s and 0s. So Y is going to be equal to 0. The U has a bunch of 1s and 0s. So U, having the number 1 in the first row, means U is going to be equal to negative 24. The V doesn't have a bunch of 1s and 0s, so its value is 0. The M has the 1 in the third row, so it's going to have a value of 180, and it had zeros everywhere else. Okay, good with this? Lovely. Let's get to part D. Okay, back with part D. Part D is asking us to pivot around the number 1, but a different number 1. The number 1 we're going to pivot around is located in the second row, second column. So I am going to make that number into a 1. Gratefully, it's already a 1, so I don't have much work to do there. But I need to get the other 2 non-pivot numbers to be 0. Excellent. So which number are you going to get to be a 0 first? Yep, the 3. See, this is their way of getting you to do 5 problems in one problem, right? Because we have 5 parts to this problem. But it's okay. You're getting the hang of it, so that's really good. So, yep, this one should be a piece of cake, shouldn't it? All right, so let's go. That 3 needs to be a 0. What are you going to do? Good. 3 times the 1, and then we're going to have to subtract, aren't we? Okay, so let's see. I wrote it as, I'm going to take the first row, and I'm going to subtract 3 times the second row. Good? All right, so let's see. Again, if you need to do some side work, pause the video, do the side work, and then come back. Cool? All right, so which row is not going to change? Yeah, row 2, because that had the pivot number in it. So I'm just going to write row 2 down for us. 1, 1, 0, 1, 0, and then 18 on the other side of that line, right? That solid line. All right, so 2 minus 3, because we're multiplying the second row by 3. So 2 minus 3, negative 1. 3 minus 3, that's a 0. 1 minus 0 is 1. Aha. 0 minus 3 is minus 3. 0 minus 0 is 0. And then 12 minus 54. Yeah. What did I get? 12 minus 54. Sometimes I just got to put my work up top there. I got a negative 42. Cool? Cool. Okay. So that 3 is gone, and now I got to work on that negative 24 to make it a 0. And again, yep, you got to use the pivot number, don't you? After you make the pivot number into a 1. All right, so what do we got to do? Yeah, we got to multiply by 24 and then add them together. All right, so I'm going to take 24 times the second row and then add it to the third row. So let's see what we get. And again, if you got to do some side work, do some side work. As a matter of fact, I highly recommend it for this one because you're multiplying by 24. So why don't we go ahead and do that side work together till we make certain we're both on the same page. So, side work. We got to do 24 times the second row. So let's see what that looks like first. So that's 24, 24, 0, 24, 0, and then we got 24 times 18. I don't know what you got, but yeah, I got to redo my work. Why? Because I forgot to write that down. So forgive me. So 24 times 18. Do it with me. Yeah, I know you guys got your calculators. So 32 and then 3 and then 192 and then 4 and then 2. So looks like I got 432. Did you? Excellent. So this is a 432 over here. And then we're going to add row 3 to it, which is a negative 10, a negative 24, a 0, a 0, a 1, and a 0. Adding it all up gives me a 14, a 0, a 0, a 24, a 1, and a 432. So 14, 0, 0, 24, 1, and 432. Excellent. Are we in agreement? Cool. What should we do? Yeah, let's relabel our columns. It's always good at the last tableau to relabel our columns to keep ourselves on track, right? Okay, and now we're ready to find the value of these variables, x, y, u, the v, and m. Okay, so what about the x? What value do you think the x is going to have? Very good, a 0. Why? Because the x column doesn't have just ones and zeros. How about the y? Good, the y, since the number 1 is in the second row, the y is going to be equal to 18. Excellent. How about the u? Yep, since it's in the first row, it's going to be equal to a negative 42. How about the v? Yep, that's going to be a 0. Why? Because it doesn't have ones and zeros in the v column. And then m is 432. Good, love it. Now, we can do part E while we're here. Why? Because part E is asking us to determine which of those pivot operations that we've already done, parts A, B, or C, increases M the most. Well, for part E, it looks like this one, the one we just did. The pivot on the number 1 that was in the second row, second column position. Good? Loving it. Okay, hope you had fun with this problem. Catch you on the flip side.